There is one number that has predicted every major property crash in modern British history, and it is not the one most people are obsessing over. It is not average house prices, it is not mortgage rates, it is not affordability ratios, and it is not what estate agents are saying on breakfast television. It is one simple metric that almost nobody outside the data world talks about, and that metric is days on market. Right now, across the United Kingdom, that number is flashing red. Not amber, not slightly concerning, but historically, unmistakably red. And if you are a homeowner, a landlord, a first-time buyer, or even just someone watching the economy closely, what I am about to walk you through could have serious financial consequences for you over the next 12 to 24 months. Let's start with what is actually happening. In December, the typical home listed for sale in the UK took between 85 and 95 days to secure a buyer. Cast your mind back to March of the same year, and that same property would have sold in roughly 45 to 55 days. That is almost double the time sitting unsold. In property markets, time is not just a number on a listing page. Time equals leverage. The longer a property sits, the weaker the seller becomes and the stronger the buyer becomes. When days on market stretches this dramatically in such a short period, it is not a seasonal blip. It is a structural shift. At the same time, more than a third of all properties currently listed have already had their asking price reduced. The average reduction is sitting at around 7%. That is the highest level of price cutting seen since early 2024. When you see reductions on this scale, it means sellers are not getting the offers they expected. They listed based on yesterday's market, but they are negotiating in today's reality, and those two things are no longer aligned. Now let's talk about London, because whether people like it or not, London is still the psychological anchor of the British property market. According to transaction and listing data from sources like the HM Land Registry, Rightmove, and market reports from Zoopla, London has recorded year-on-year price declines ranging roughly between 1 and 2.4%, depending on the month measured. Sales volumes in parts of the capital have fallen more than 20%. In a market that depends on liquidity and confidence, a collapse in transaction volume is often more telling than a modest headline price drop. When homes stop changing hands, price discovery breaks down. Sellers anchor to old valuations, buyers anchor to new affordability limits, and the gap between them widens. The mainstream narrative right now says the market has stabilized. Mortgage rates are lower than they were at their peak in 2023. Wages have grown faster than house prices in nominal terms over the past year. First-time buyer activity has ticked up slightly. Boxing Day traffic on Rightmove hit record levels. All of that is technically true, but data can tell a truthful story while still hiding the bigger picture. Inventory is sitting at a 12-year high. Total homes listed for sale across the UK are at levels not seen since 2014. London alone has roughly 14% more homes on the market compared to a year ago. In a healthy market, rising supply would be matched by rising transactions. But transaction forecasts from UK Finance suggest volumes for 2026 and 2027 are essentially flat, hovering around 1.2 million transactions annually. That is not growth. That is stagnation. When supply expands and demand does not, sellers compete. And when sellers compete, they cut. This is where days on market becomes the canary in the coal mine. It is the leading indicator. Price indices are lagging indicators because they are based on completed sales, which reflect decisions made months earlier. Days on market tells you what is happening now, in real time. When that number doubles, it is telling you that buyer urgency has evaporated. Buyers are browsing, negotiating harder, submitting lower offers, or simply waiting. And when waiting becomes widespread behavior, pricing power shifts decisively. Over 1/3 of listings have already been reduced. A 7% average cut might not sound catastrophic, but on a £400,000 property, that is £28,000 gone. On a £750,000 property, that is more than £50,000. Multiply that across thousands of listings, and you begin to see the scale of the repricing underway. The weakness is not evenly distributed. Central London flats, particularly in boroughs like Kensington and Chelsea, are sitting on the market for extended periods compared to prior years. Properties above £2 million are facing particularly thin demand. Buyers in that bracket are cautious, watching policy changes such as potential tax reforms and waiting for clarity before committing. Sellers, meanwhile, are reluctant to slash prices dramatically, so listings linger. Outside London, the southeast and east of England have recorded year-on-year asking price declines in several areas. The southwest has seen extended marketing periods feeding directly into price corrections. Even regions like the northwest and parts of Scotland, where nominal growth of 2 to 3% is still being reported, are losing ground in real terms once inflation is accounted for. With inflation running around 3% or more, a 2% nominal gain is effectively a loss of purchasing power. An analysis published earlier this year by the New Statesman highlighted that when adjusted for inflation, UK house prices have fallen significantly since their 2022 peak. This is the part many people miss. Nominal stability masks real erosion. If a home was worth £300,000 in 2022 and is still worth roughly £300,000 today, but inflation has risen cumulatively by close to 15 to 20% over that period, the real value of that asset has declined materially. Homeowners may not feel poorer because the headline number has not changed, but in economic terms, they are. Now layer on the mortgage situation. Approximately 1.8 million fixed-rate mortgages are due to expire in 2026. Many of these were secured in 2020 and 2021 at rates between 2 and 2.5%. Today, the average 5-year fixed rate is closer to the mid-4% range. If borrowers fail to remortgage and revert to their lender's standard variable rate, they could face rates above 7%. The jump in monthly payments can be dramatic. For a £250,000 mortgage, the difference between a 2.5% rate and a 4.4% rate can mean hundreds of pounds extra per month. At 7%, the increase becomes even more severe. UK Finance expects repossessions to rise modestly, but the absolute level is less important than the trend. When a large cohort of borrowers simultaneously faces higher monthly costs, financial stress increases. Not all will default, but some will be forced to sell. And forced sellers do not negotiate from a position of strength. They accept lower offers to secure speed and certainty. Meanwhile, unemployment has edged up to just above 5%, the highest level in several years. Investment banks, such as Goldman Sachs, have projected further softening in the labour market. When job security declines at the same time, mortgage payments rise. The pressure intensifies. Add rising council tax, higher utility bills, and persistent cost of living challenges, and household balance sheets become stretched. Another structural shift is occurring in the rental sector. The upcoming renters' rights reforms, combined with tax changes and regulatory burdens introduced over recent years, have pushed many landlords to reconsider their portfolios. Surveys indicate that a substantial proportion of landlords intend to reduce holdings or exit altogether. In theory, landlord selling could create buying opportunities for owner-occupiers. In practice, those buyers need deposits. The average first-time buyer deposit in England is now tens of thousands of pounds. In London, it exceeds £100,000 in many cases. With median salaries around £39,000, saving that deposit can take years, particularly when rents, food, and energy costs consume most disposable income. Youth unemployment remains elevated, and the average age of first-time buyers has drifted into the mid-30s. The much-discussed generational wealth transfer has not materialized at scale, sufficient to offset affordability constraints. Many parents are asset-rich but cash flow constrained, dealing with their own higher mortgage payments and retirement uncertainties. At the same time, rental growth has cooled, and in some regions, rents are falling. When rents decline, landlord yields compress. Lower yields reduce the attractiveness of buy-to-let as an investment. That can trigger further selling. More selling increases supply. If buyer demand does not expand proportionally, prices come under additional pressure. This is how feedback loops form in property markets. They rarely collapse overnight. Instead, they grind lower over several years. The truth that many in the property industry hesitate to state clearly is this. When adjusted for inflation, the UK housing market has already experienced a significant correction since 2022. It has not felt like 2008 because nominal prices have not collapsed in a dramatic fashion. There have been no overnight 15% drops splashed across front pages. Instead, there has been a slow bleed. Real value has eroded quietly, month after month. Property markets move in cycles, but they also respond to mathematics. Supply versus demand, cost of borrowing versus income growth, liquidity versus stagnation. Right now, the mathematics is shifting. Days on market is not a sensational headline. It is a quiet statistic buried in reports. But historically, it has turned before prices did. It turned before 2008 became obvious. And it is turning again now. Watch that number closely, because in property, time is money. And when time doubles, money usually moves next.